Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. It is Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversations together. I'm your host, Jenny Wyndham.
And I'm Joel Thomas.
And hair to hair, Joel. Hair to hair. How are you doing?
Hair to hair, nail to nail.
Yeah.
We celebrate our resistance on this podcast. So
yeah, sphere to square.
That's what I was trying to think of. Sphere to square.
I don't think I remember nail to nail.
Is not a real thing.
It's not it. But we have been beginning our journey into 1000xRESIST by Sunset Visitor, and oh my gosh, I'm so excited to just really get into this game with everyone. I played the demo during Ludonarracon just last month, and I was so blown away. I was debating a few other games, but instantly I was like, nope, we're going to be playing this game. We're going to play it because I think it is going to be one of the best narrative games of 2024. Early prediction, because frankly, I have not finished the game yet. I'm playing it in tandem with everyone during the club, maybe just like slightly ahead so I can kind of prep the questions. But this game is so flippin' good. Yeah. What are some of your first impressions?
I've got
just
thoughts.
Really quickly.
I've got feelings. I've got emotions. I've got predictions. So it's hitting all my favorite triggers right now. I am very much vibing with this game. All right, and sounds like you might be enjoying it then.
Who's to say? No conclusions yet. But for those of you who are joining for the first time, welcome. Again, this is a game club where every month we pick one title, we play it together as a community, and this podcast is meant for us to go really section by section through the game and dive into it a little bit deeper, discuss it, not only talk about what's happening in the game, almost sort of a pseudo walkthrough of the story, but also add in our commentary, our feelings on what's going on with the game, not simply the mechanics, but how it connects to stuff that we are experiencing in our lives and how we sort of just reflect on this game as people who consume media and use it to be just more informed about the world around them. So if you would like to join and you haven't, go to geeksandgrounds.com to sign up for the newsletter. That's where you'll get notifications about the podcast, as well as supplementary materials to help expand your understanding. I think with this game in particular, there's a lot of historical context that I'll be sending along in those newsletters. So definitely subscribe if you haven't. Join in the Discord if you'd like to chat with the rest of the community as we play.
I think I gotta give a shout out to the Discord community this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
I deeply appreciate that after I was very vulnerable on the podcast on the last episode about how terrible I was at Hyperlight Drifter, I did not get absolutely roasted in the comments. So
of course not. Would never, our community would never, honestly.
Top tier folks.
Maybe lighthearted jabs, but honestly, I think we have a really good crew of folks who it's not about being like pro gamers. It's about enjoying games and just having a good time with it in whatever level of gaming you're at.
Absolutely.
And that's definitely why we pick a variety of games. So this one plays very differently than last month's title. Again, we're playing 1000xRESIST, but we're not going to start with that. We usually like to ease in with what we call the pastry case, because in this virtual cafe of sorts, we like to start with a little bit of a sampler, taste what's going on in the industry and what else we've been playing besides the game of the month. So Joel, we have our topic of the show just to get us going, and we're halfway through the year. It's already June, which is kind of ridiculous. I refuse to see it. Unfortunately, though, work and schedules like Summer Game Fest is happening this week.
Yep.
Scary. I've got a couple announcements going live, so that's going to be intense. But since we're halfway, I thought it'd be really cool just to go through and see 5 of your top games that you've played this year. They don't have to have been released this year. Just what are 5 of the experiences that you've gone through? They don't have to be Geeks and Grounds titles. What are some of the 5 top experiences for you?
It's been a challenging 6 months. And so I decided to really focus on some games that have brought me a lot of comfort since the beginning of the year. I gotta shout out American Arcadia. I just so deeply enjoyed and appreciated this game. It was like just something to really like focus in on and sink my mind into a bit. So really loved that. I thought the conversations in the community and that we got to have with the developers was just really, really incredible. So American Arcadia, definitely up on that list.
Nice.
On the complete opposite end of that spectrum is Balatro, where I've had no real deep thought conversations. It's just kind of, you're playing cards and picking up jokers.
Yep.
And it's been the perfect distraction game and like chewing gum for the mind kind of game. And, bored on a plane kind of game. So really, really appreciated that. And, the next three, I'm going to kind of rapid fire because they're not from the 2024 time period. But good Lord, as I've been hanging out with folks, it has been such a fun time to play. So the first is Mario Party 3 on the Switch emulator has been really fun to go back to. And, I picked up the most recent Mario Party for Switch, like the new one, and I was like, it does not hit the same. And I still don't really know why, but it doesn't. But Mario Party 3 holds up, y'all.
Nice.
On that same token, Mario Kart, I was hanging out with my little 5-year-old nephew, and we got to play a lot of Mario Kart together, and it was very much like trying to encourage him as he was doing really good. I got up to 4th place a couple times, and he was so excited, and that was just a lot of fun.
That's so cute.
Yes. And
do you have a character that you like to pick for Mario Kart? Do you have a go-to?
I have always been a Yoshi main, and it was always my brothers and I, it was who could move their cursor to the Yoshi character fast enough. And just recently I've switched to Baby Luigi because I love his energy and I love the cuteness. One of the things that my nephew has started to do, which I love, is whenever he gets the Bullet Bill item, he'll hit it and he just screams out, "Take me home, Bullet Bill," and it just
take me home. Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
It's very, very cute. And then of course y'all know me. I didn't finish Baldur's Gate until this year. So I think it was February when I finally finished my first run. And for many, many reasons, I gotta give that a top 5 spot for me. So those are my tops.
Sure.
Yeah. How about you, Jenny? What have you been feeling in the last 6 months?
Gosh, it's tough because we have had a really outstanding year. Every year we say this, but I think especially this year, I have a backlog of games that I'm pretty sure would be in this top 5 category that I just haven't really gotten to. So I think Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is one example of a game where I'm I've started it. I have not gotten far enough to really definitively say, but it is currently so good that I feel like it's going to be there. But it's not actually making the list. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, for folks who don't know, is a sort of a puzzle escape room mystery kind of game, super stylistic by the folks who did Sayonara Wild Hearts. And yeah, super cool. I won't say too much more because a lot of it is discovering that mystery, but I'll probably report on it in a few weeks since I'm digging into it now. I think for me, one of the first games that came to mind, because I've been so hyped for it, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yes.
It's just one of those games where if you know me, you know that any game, any year that releases a Final Fantasy game, that game is likely going to be in my top 5 with a rare exception. There are a few recent releases for Final Fantasy that didn't quite cut it for me, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, loved it. Currently up there. These are also in no particular order. Crow County. For fans of Resident Evil, survival horror, PS1 era graphics, Crow County is just the perfect snack size, just sort of dedication and love letter to those Resident Evil kind of games. It's based on a theme park. You're investigating, these sort of scary events that have happened at a theme park. And so each area of the theme park is a biome that you get to explore. And it's not too difficult. They have accessibility settings. So if you're like, I just want to enjoy the story, there's like a chill mode essentially.
Chill mode.
So yeah, if you want to just kind of experience the game and its atmosphere, you can do that. If you want to go classic survival horror gameplay, you can do that. Really great experience. And it was under 10 hours for me to play, which for me is like perfect.
Yeah.
Games under, I think folks were saying in the Discord actually, like, what is the prime level of game duration you're looking for? And 6 to 10 hours seems to be the range that everyone's like, that's it for me. I'm in that boat too. Generally, my bandwidth is, I can play like 1 or 2 40+ hour games a year. Those are reserved for special titles, but most everything else is like sub 15 hours for me is like where my sweet spot is.
Okay, here's a question. You have a lot of video game playing friends.
Yes.
Do you have any of them, or like, can you think of any of them who would say that their favorite duration of game is 40+ hours?
I have probably one for sure, maybe 2 that come to mind that are like super into the very long like JRPG epic adventures that are like 60+ hours.
Yeah.
And that is their specialty. And I have some content creators that I've worked with who I would consider like more acquaintance friends, not like close friends. And I have folks I've worked with who I know specialize in that, and so that's what they play. But I think the vast majority of my closer friends are like 10 to 15 hours is kind of where they tap out, unless it's something truly engaging or special to them.
It's hard for me to fathom that, to be honest, but I appreciate the diversity of thought and opinion here. And, you know, if y'all are in the Discord and you're like, I'm a 60-hour+ person, no hate. I was just curious.
No, I don't think it came across as like judgmental at all. I think it's just really, I admire people who have that amount of time organization that they can spend, or the endurance that they can stay interested in a story for that long. Because I think for me, it's less a time thing and more of a, gosh, but I just kind of want like, I like new stories. I like to just experience more variety.
That's the same for me. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but yes, totally.
No. Yeah, so let's see. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Crow County, Animal Well. We've been talking about it in the Discord as well. So again, hop in the Discord if you are an Animal Well fan. Got a lot of co-conspirators there who may be also egg hunting. I'm still egg hunting, although it's taken a little bit of a backseat to try and finish some of these other games. But Animal Well is just a exploration focused Metroidvania. You explore this world that's very strange. You are a blob, but everything else is like sort of regular animals from nature, but there's also these sort of digital spins to some of them and some of the items that you discover. So it's a really beautiful game, wonderful soundtrack. I would recommend it to people who like puzzles and who like maybe a little bit of frustration. Like, it's curated frustration.
Curated frustration. Okay.
It's one of those games where I think you are going to hit a wall. It's very expected. And if you're the kind of player who takes joy in hitting that wall, like tapping it a few times, coming back to it, and like eventually figuring it out, whether or not you use a guide, ask some friends, or just like go at it on your own, I think it's one of those games that's perfect. I love that feeling. The light bulb moment is something that I crave in games, and this game is full of it.
Or if you have like older sibling Jenny Wyndham that you can give a call and be like, I'm stuck, can you help?
I'm looking up again. I think I credited. It was Pixelated Soul who linked the guide in the Discord. So I put that in the last week's newsletter, but that is a guide that I have been using to just help push me in the right direction, because it is a challenging game for sure. But Animal was really good. Just challenging puzzles, not challenging movement wise. It's super polished in that.
That's awesome.
And then let's see. I guess I'll bring Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I'm not done with it, but I think it is a standout game. I have faith that it will be one of those top games. And honestly, for my 5th, it was tough because I was like, man, honestly, we played One Shot, and for me, that was such like an emotionally, like, we kicked off the year with One Shot. And so I think I'm going to have to include One Shot in there as well, where I think it's just such a beautifully done game. It has its flaws, but that's okay. I'm very fine with a flawed game. It held enough of an emotional impact that I think it's, for me, up there as a top of just played in 2024.
You know, now that you say that, okay, if I keep my theme like games of comfort for the year, I'm going to keep my list intact. But if we were like saying like top games, like games that were favorites, One Shot's got to be up there for me too. That was just such an experience, and one I will not forget. So great callback there.
Yeah. What else have you been getting up to over the last week? Anything of interest?
Got a couple things. Picked up a new book called Dollar Gut Dream Department Store, which is about a woman who works in as like in the service industry in a department store that sells dreams. And so it's like when you fall asleep every night, your subconscious essentially stumbles into one of several dream department stores and it buys a dream. And she's a person who works at the counter selling dreams, essentially.
That's cool.
So a little bit into that, really enjoying it. I love me some whimsy in a book, and it's whimsical for sure. The new season of New Adventures of Young Superman on HBO dropped over the last couple weeks, and it's DC finally realizing that like, oh, if we use an anime studio and create an anime version of Superman and of our superheroes, it's way better. And it is way better. Just very cute.
Yeah. Is it like an actual, like styled like a Japanese anime?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And it's also like, it pulls like the motifs that you get with anime. Like, it's very much centered on like the romance of Superman and Lois Lane, and they have like they're like, I don't know, 20, 21, so like they're just goobers, and it's great. And Jimmy Olsen's there, and he's a goober, and it's just like, it feels like a silly like YA like romance with a little bit of action anime, and I'm way here for it. It's funny, the animation's incredible, so would highly recommend that one.
Nice.
And then this week, I did get 9 Souls. Now, I have not gotten to play it hardly at all. I think I played maybe an hour. But I'm very much enjoying it. I think when we're done recording, I'm going to be taking a big chunk of time to just sit and play. So too soon for me to give like a review at this point. But God, I'm so excited for this.
So you've probably seen, because I think at the beginning, like they have beautiful cutscenes and animation, and you've seen maybe like that twist that happens at that point, like an hour in.
Actually, I have not hit a twist yet. So
you've not hit a twist.
Like I said, it's not been much for me. It's been like just getting started. So maybe it's not even been a full hour yet.
Yeah,
it's been like.
Or like a tonal shift, I guess. It's not really a twist, but there's like a tonal moment that happens.
Actually, then I do know what you're talking about.
Okay,
we'll get some spoiler-free things here, but so I'm so excited to like dig into that one more deeply. But just
maybe for folks who haven't heard of 9 Souls, like how would you describe it to someone who has not heard the game before?
Do you remember? Do you remember when you used to play like Super Smash Brothers Melee, and you were like Marth and Roy, and they had the like down B deflect button that was like it's a parry. The central mechanic of this game is you're this really cute but very cool fox dude with a cool sword that can do a little bit of magic, and the whole thing is you can reflect and parry other people's things. Like that's the center of the game. And so, really, really cool animation, gorgeous designs. Really excited to see as they dig into like the depth of the story, where it goes. So lots to be excited about there.
Nice. Yeah, that's one where I have the key. I have the game. I just have not played it yet. Like that Little Kitty Big City, I've started, but I've barely scratched the surface. Like I've replayed the demo of Little Kitty Big City, essentially. Venture to the Vile, I started. Athenian Rhapsody. There are like maybe 4 games I'm playing, a couple of games under embargo that I'm also trying to play in time for the embargo lift. It's wild. It's a busy time.
What are you getting into?
So not a whole lot. Again, I've got a few games that I'm playing that are under embargo that I'll be able to talk about more next week, I would assume. The biggest thing that I really spent time watching, thinking about, talking with Sam and I watched a YouTube video called "The Spectacular Failure of the Star Wars Hotel" by Jenny Nicholson. Jenny Nicholson is a YouTuber who hasn't posted in a while. And so when she dropped this, I was like, oh, cool. All right, this will be interesting. I know she's a Star Wars fan. Like, this was a really interesting concept to me. It seemed like it wasn't really accessible to a lot of people. So I'm very interested to see what she's got to say. This video is about 4 hours long. We're in the era of YouTubers doing these like basically docu-series style,
Yeah.
like massive video essays that are not just like an hour or two, like 4 hours long. There was one, I don't know if you saw on plagiarism. Oh, who dropped it? That was also like 4 hours long.
Oh wait, I do remember this. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up just because it was so good, and if you have not watched it, I really want to just like mention it. And of course, I type it H Bomber Guys. That's who it was. It was H Bomber Guys 4 hour video on plagiarism, and I'm gonna write a note to just link it. Bomber Guys video on plagiarism, because it was also a very interesting watch. But the spectacular failure of the Star Wars Hotel was incredibly interesting to me as someone who recently, like in the last couple of years, went to Disneyland and found myself totally disillusioned by it. I like, admittedly, it was like a horrible kind of. The company we had was wonderful. The experience itself, it was just like so. The facade and the capitalism of it all just like was kind of intolerable. It felt like we were in a layer of like Dante's Inferno, essentially one of
Oh
those layers of hell.
no.
Because it is so commercial, it is so ultra capitalistic when you go to Disneyland, and this hotel is a layer above that. I think for 2 nights, she says it was like $6,000 per person, something ridiculous like that. And while it's not Fire Festival levels of things going poorly when guests arrived, it was absolutely not $6,000 worth. I think she calculated it was like $2 a minute or something like that per person. It is not worth that level of experience. And what I appreciate about her video is she went in as someone who was hopeful and excited to experience something like an immersive, essentially role play LARPing hotel experience, and came out of it not only telling us how it actually happened, but sort of what this indicates for Disney as a whole, and what this indicates in terms of like where we are in this world that is so driven by corporate greed. Really interesting video. We had it on. Sam and I just had it on over the like a couple of nights, watched different sections of it. She breaks it up into sections, so it's quite easy to find your place. And I don't think anything was ultra surprising, but it was just a really great watch to have just going on in the background. So I would highly recommend it.
Man, yeah, as a relatively large Star Wars nerd, it was one of the things that when they first announced it, I was like, this sounds so cool. I would totally do this. And then I saw the price tag and I was like, absolutely not. And then I remember watching the early reviewers. They're like, here's my hotel room, which is like a Cracker Jack box and doesn't have windows to the outside, which makes sense when you're trying to do this like immersive experience. But if you're, I don't know, not getting natural sunlight for an extended period of time, that can be a lot.
Yeah, I think she addresses all of that too. I think they actually had, and you'll see if you watch the video, so they had like a room available for, they called it like, the like acclimatation room, or what is it? Basically when you like climatize yourself to like the planet you're going to visit. And so that was the excuse of having a like Earth themed room so that people could just get fresh air. And I mean, I admit, like, I guess all of the trips had to be exactly 2 days. You couldn't stay for longer if you wanted. It was just really fascinating, I think, for me. I recently went to see Sleep No More, which I know you've seen before as well. And when she discusses this idea of immersion, and how Disney and theme parks in general are like throwing this word around. Like, it's an immersive experience. You're going to be immersed. You're going to immerse yourselves in Star Wars. It's your Star Wars story. I think what was really interesting to me is this idea of like your Star Wars immersive experience versus Sleep No More, which for folks who aren't familiar is this actual like immersive theater show where you actually don a mask and you walk through the environment as the play is happening, and you choose what you are engaging with and what you don't want to spend time with. And what struck me was that in that experience, it wasn't our story. Like, we were very much passive participants in this, and we were observing other stories, but it felt truly immersive because I was like, in this narrative, I wouldn't be the main character. Like, I wouldn't. That's fine. And in the Star Wars experience, they made such a big deal about how it's your turn to live your Star Wars journey, which is impossible if you have a hotel full of people having their Star Wars journey. It was great. I thought a lot about it. I wrote about it in my journal because it was just an interesting idea of like, what does immersion mean? What does it look like? And also how Disney is just a corporate dumpster fire. So for many reasons, but this is just yet another one to add to the pile.
Yeah, I'll add just like a couple like counter examples to this as well. Sleep No More. I didn't get to see Sleep No More. I saw a production in London that is now closed called Burnt City by the same production company. And it was a similar thing. You come in wearing masks and you get to follow characters around and the environment you get to explore and be a part of. And the way they folded you in, I'm going to spoil this since it doesn't exist anymore, but it is totally worth like going to Wikipedia and reading about this play because it was incredible. You are essentially in the underworld in like an ancient Greek like god situation, and you are replaying over and over the events that led up to the Trojan War. And you're like, gods and goddesses are there and they're walking around, and the way that like if you go through a couple loops of this story and it changes each time you're there, and some characters are able to see you, the audience, and like interact with you, because then the framing is like you are a spirit in the underworld who is like bearing witness to all of this. And so it's just like, to your point, it's like that is a level of participation that feels very natural, because it's not like, you know, LARPing where it's like, oh ho, I have my sword and I will defeat you. It's like, no, like you're still there and like you get to participate, but it's not about you. It's about the story and the world that you're in.
Right.
And I think the smaller scale example of this is Meow Wolf. Meow Wolf, for a fraction of the price of a Disney experience, gives you a very immersive time with puzzles to solve. And like, to me, that's just like a top tier immersive experience for me. So would recommend.
Yeah, no, I think if anyone, I mean, spoiler it for folks who hadn't seen it, but it was in the news a while back, but that Star Wars hotel is no longer, like, it's shut down.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
So yeah, so this video came out, and originally she said this was going to be a review of her experience, and she had to pivot. And so that's why the final third of her video is actually an analysis of why she think it shut down and what it means, sort of in a grander scale. Again, really interesting video. I honestly could spend this whole episode just talking, this whole podcast talking about that, because of the things that it brought up in terms of just theme park experiences, exploitation, just like fandom and corporate like decision making, and how they are just completely at odds. But we can talk about it in the Discord if anyone's interested. Just let me know. Or, you know, we could always dedicate a separate episode to that if folks are really interested. But
love it.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is a demo that I've played called Grun. It's available on Steam. It's free. I think I'll tell you what the game is about, but I will say, if you enjoyed Slay the Princess, I think you should try Grun. The gameplay is totally different. The story is totally different. But the same premise, this idea of you get to choose different behaviors that sort of unlock different paths in this game. This demo has 5 different endings. And basically the premise is you are a gardener hired to clean up the yard at this house for the weekend. You are given some tools and instructions to trim the grass, trim the hedges, water the flowers, clean up the garbage. But do not go into the house and do not stay out after dark. Which you give me the do nots, and I'm like, okay, what are the first things I'm going to try to do? And I won't say much more than that. The demo is this wonderful blend of that, again, Slay the Princess-esque element of choice, like action, choice, and consequence. I think maybe to a different degree, but the flavors there, as well as just really mundane tasks, which I love in games. Like, you just walk around trimming the grass by hand with shears, trimming the hedges with shears, literally just picking up garbage. I love that kind of mundane task stuff in games. So I thought it was a really fun blend of this like really intriguing mystery that's very eerie and ominous and tense. Not super scary, but you are feeling like anxious a little bit because something's up. And then just like the most mundane gameplay. And I say that as a compliment.
I guess coming back to like the Dredge experience and knowing how I like to follow the rules in a narrative, it'd be like, how successful can I be in not going in the house and not staying out at night? That would be my entire objective for playing a game like that.
And I will say, just to also manage expectations, it's a small game, so you can't like totally go out and do all of these wild things, but there's enough like, ooh, what if I tried this? What if I did this? Ooh, maybe I'll push this boundary a little bit or take this path. I originally went in and I was like, I'll just try one of the endings. Play just a round and then I'll save it. I ended up playing it for 3 hours and I got all 5 endings. It was that good.
Wow. Okay.
It was really fun.
Huge compliment from Jenny.
Yeah. So it's called Grun. And yeah, check it out. Just to close out the pastry case, notable indie game releases this week. We got Rolling Hills, which is a sushi life sim coming on June 4th to PC. Fireside, which is basically like a trading game where you are a merchant that's been washed ashore and you have to like rebuild your merchant wares, but you do this through conversation and helping others, and you're helping restore the island. That's also coming out June 4th on PC. Kameru, a Frog Refuge or Sanctuary, that's on June 8th on Xbox, Switch, and PC. This is super cute. If you like frogs, it's just a life sim, like management frog game where you just like you make a wetland, you bring frogs in, you breed the frogs, they make more cute frogs, you feed them, you play with them. Just really cute, cozy frog game. And Tracks of Thought on June 10th. It comes out on PC, and that is a game about you and a bunch of people on a train. You're all bugs. You're on a bug train. All of you have forgotten sort of why you're there. And so the mystery is figuring out why you're there. And as you interact with folks on the train, you go through conversation-based card battles. So this is a very cozy, thoughtful game about interacting with people. And the choices that you make in this game do slightly influence the path that you take I don't know if there are multiple endings, but I do know that there's variation in what happens within the game. So lots of cozy games.
Card game. That's interesting.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those come through. Like, I mean, not a card game, but Chance of Sonar was that other language game. What was the trading game? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. There was a game that was about like sort of going on merchant trading paths, and that was also like a card sort of conversation game.
I wonder, when you say that, because it's like I'm trying to like picture it. Is it similar to like how Cosmic Wheel was, where it's like you're using the tarot cards to kind of like inform your dialogue, or is like you have actual cards that you use, like Cards Against Humanity, to like make dialogue happen?
No, it was more like cards. Like in the game that I'm thinking of, each card had like a different shape, and each sort of shape meant sort of a different tone.
Got it.
But so like slightly different ones, and it's driving me up the wall because I cannot remember the name. So if anyone, I think I remembered it. Signs of the Sojourner. So if anyone is like, ooh, deck building conversation games, Signs of the Sojourner is another one if you want more of the same. But yeah, really good stuff.
Do they sell these for real life? And would it be weird as I meet people to be like, I have a set of cards, and I'm going to use it to inform my conversation with you.
I mean, no joke. I think I've seen those. Like, I mean, there's the kitschy ones that are conversation starters, but I've seen genuine, like, hey, here are fun like cards that we can use to keep the conversation going.
Greetings,
So,
and
yeah.
how are you?
So that is it for the pastry case. Those are the releases and what we've been playing, watching, reading, listening to outside of our monthly brew. Speaking of our monthly brew, let's get into 1000 Times Resist.
1000 Times Resist.
So, before we get into our experience of actually playing the game, I'm curious if you came into it. First, did you know about this game prior to me mentioning it?
I did not. This is one of the ones that a classic experience where I'm walking in pretty much completely unaware of the story and mechanics, and I think I watched like I watched a trailer for it, so I knew kind of like stylistically what it would be like, but I didn't know anything about the story beyond that. So, how about you?
Awesome.
Did you play this at Ludonarracon? Is that correct?
Yes, there was a demo out during Ludonarracon. I had seen this game on Twitter, but narrative games are so hit, like the sort of purely narrative games are really hit or miss for me. So I had my eye on it, but I was honestly like, I'm just gonna wait and see kind of once I can get my hands on it. This game was one that stood out to me at Ludonarracon because of the premise. And once I played the demo, I instantly was just like, I want more, and selfishly will bring everyone along in the journey with me. But I do think this is going to be a game that is really important to discuss and play and again savor, especially considering I think just the year we're having and sort of the time that we are in the world right now.
I gotta say, literally every few minutes, like I was telling Jenny right before we hopped on today, I probably took like, let's see here. Yes, 6 pages of notes during just these first 2 chapters. There is so much to think about and wonder about and explore about in here, and I'm just really eager to learn more about what is happening in this world.
Yes, I know. I took a bunch of notes. I actually ended up taking more screenshots just because it was so gripping. I almost didn't want to stop to take my hand off the game to like write down notes. And so I feel like I was screenshotting every other line. I think the game, literally every other line could be its own pull quote
I totally
for
agree
just
with
like
that.
an important thing to draw from the game, which whoever did the writing on this, oh my gosh. As a quick note, I wanted to say as a quick note too for folks listening, and as a nice teaser ahead of time, I mentioned during the hangout like I was going to reach out to the developers, see if we could get them to come onto the podcast, and fortunately they were super excited to. So if you have questions, please consider emailing them to me at jenny@geeksandgrounds.com. I'm going to be curating the list. I will include as many of them as possible. We may not be able to get to all of them just because we'll only have about an hour, to have the conversation. But if you have questions, whether it's about themes within the game, whether it's about the developers themselves, please do send them in to me, and we will do our best to get as many of them asked and answered as possible. That will be happening at the end of the month. The interview will be recorded on the 23rd, so just please send it to me by like June 22nd, and I'll put a reminder in the newsletter as well as in the podcast, so that if you need that verbal reminder or that visual reminder, it is there. But sorry, go ahead, Joel.
No, I was just gonna say, like, there are lines of dialogue in this that are incomprehensible to me in the best way. Like, I don't know what this means, but the words and the way they're put together are just really beautiful. And it hints to me that like by like later I will know what this means. Like your hair to hair example is a great example of that, where it's like the first time I heard that, or first couple times, like, what is that? And now I have a much better understanding of what's happening with that. So yeah, I think the writing so far has just been outstanding.
Yeah. For folks who are maybe enjoying the podcast and listening, but maybe not able to play at the same time, that's always totally okay. So let me read the Steam description really fast just to give that like overview, concept, or elevator pitch of this game. 1000xRESIST is a thrilling sci-fi adventure. The year is unknown, and a disease spread by an alien invasion keeps you underground. You are Watcher. You dutifully fulfill your purpose in serving the ALLMOTHER until the day you discover a shocking secret that changes everything. Oh my gosh. So let's get into it. We begin with the prologue that's called just Chapter Redacted. This is just the intro to the game. Do you want to describe it? Because I feel like I've also been talking a lot. So you should kick us off, Joel.
Opening of the game, you see a woman who is wearing like a very like futuristic suit. I don't know if you would call it armor. It just looks like a future outfit, like kind of a mask on. The mouth is covered. There's like almost like a ventilator thing happening here. And then you see a person who literally, like, my first note is, okay, sleeves, because you see this person in the armor, is like very futuristic armor, walking up to another woman who looks very similar, that is wearing this like black, almost religious attire, like dress, huge billowing sleeves. And in this opening scene, you watch the person in the future suit stab the woman in the religious suit. And in this opening bit, like, you are like, the imagery surrounding this is stunning. Like, the way they have constructed these levels and everything, like from the moment you start this game, like the floor is just covered in this gorgeous water. The lights are bringing out like really fascinating shadows on the ground. Like, it's just really, really interesting. And you are playing a character called Watcher, or the Watcher, I suppose, capital W. And essentially this opening scene is what kicks off, like, you're in media res, right? You open with this murder. And then the coming two chapters that we'll be discussing today are take place days, weeks, potentially before this event. And we are going to find out what caused this act of rebellion.
And I love that you brought up that this did start sort of in media res, because one thing that I wanted to highlight about Sunset Visitor, the developers, is that they are a group that is really proficient in a wide variety of mediums. So they have done film, they've done theater, they've done dance, they've done all sorts of art forms. And this game, I was reading a little bit about the studio and the story behind this game, and this came as a result of having to, during lockdown and quarantine, not be able to create in person with each other, and not be able to create the media that they maybe were most used to, and moving to video games, or focusing perhaps more on video games. I think they didn't come in totally fresh, but I think they focused and shifted to creating this game as a result of the pandemic. And so this game, if you're playing it and you're like, wow, I'm getting like 2020 vibes, I'm getting like, oh my gosh, it's a pandemic vibes. Yes.
Correct.
It is very much informed by their lived experiences. And we'll be talking about even more historical references as we play, because there are plenty. But yes, sorry, keep it going, Joel.
No. I think that's all incredible context, because it's interesting as you watch the characters, just their basic movements. Like, there's scenes where you see characters dance, you see them arguing each other. You don't ever see their mouths move, which I think is a really interesting choice that I'm curious to see if that's stylistic or somehow driven by the narrative. I have some thoughts on this. But yeah, so you have this opening sequence, you see this murder happen, and then immediately the story moves you to the past. And you get this, you're the Watcher, you're moving around through this kind of home base type place, and you start meeting some of the other characters. You meet a character called Healer. You meet a character called Bang Bang Fire, BBF, which I think is an incredible name. It looks a lot like Bakugo from My Hero Academia. And you, from the opening lines of these dialogue, to your earlier point, like, you're getting these like one sentence clips of something. I'm like, I would get that tattooed on my body. Like, this is incredible. And then in this opening prologue, it kind of the thrust of what happens is one of your friends, sisters, you're not really sure what the connection is, someone who also looks quite a lot like you, but dressed in all green, called Fixer, is about to leave. She's about to get on a train and go somewhere. The framing is like, is she about to die and reincarnate? Is she about to go meet someone maybe called Mother to help kill these things called capital O occupants? A lot of mystery about where she's going. And you get kind of one of my first favorite things where she's like, remember when we were younger and we ran along these train tracks and we ended up right back at this platform? Like, how is the Mother is able to make it so that only when we're on the train do the tracks lead somewhere else? And so to me, for an opening prologue, talk about like doing your job. So many questions got raised. I was immediately intrigued. The technology looks interesting. The fact that these characters are all wearing these distinct colors, like your color is all blue. You know, like, there's just so many layers of curiosity that I had just from the prologue. So I would love to know, like, what were some of your like go-to initial feelings, thoughts, curiosities as you were playing for the prologue?
I mean, I mirror a lot of your just like compliments of it. I think what was really interesting to me, again, we started with some really intense action. The title scene, you know, the title card comes up, and then we're in this sort of like futuristic subway station.
That is what it's like. Yeah.
You know, we start and there's like a little bit of sort of glass and trees when you talk to your first, I forget who you meet first. Was it maybe the librarian? I forget.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember
Maybe,
either.
but whoever we meet first, you know, we talk to them. We know we're saying goodbye to a friend. But I think what was really interesting is this, the one thing that you hadn't mentioned is, or hadn't touched on too deeply, is this idea of each of them having a specific role and each of them having a specific color. It was giving Power Rangers a little bit.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Like the Sentai sort of like, like each of them had a role. And so when I felt Power Rangers, I was like, okay, you have these roles. Like BB Fire is a little bit different because it's a little bit longer, but everyone is like Watcher, Fixer, Healer. Somehow we're going to be working together to create like some sort of thematic megazord of helping this dystopic society, because we're talking about these occupants that have come in. We don't know what is happening or what the status of this is, but this seems like we're a powerful like group that is meant to fix and heal something as a unit together, which I think is really fascinating.
It sounds like you took a lot of screenshots. I'm curious if there are any like quotes or things that stood out to you. I'll share mine that I really loved is, there is a then and you will receive it. Oh,
that's really good.
Such a good line.
Let me grab my Steam Deck really fast because I thought that it would automatically sync to my computer. It did not. So let me grab my Steam Deck so I can just like actually read one of the many screenshots that I took. All right, I'm back and I'm scrolling because there are too many screenshots. There are too many. Oh yeah, and we met Knower first. That's who we began with. Couple of my favorites, because there were too many that I didn't have. I was starting to get hand cramps even with the prologue, so I didn't watch them, or I didn't write them down. Is there an easy way to just like go through these without having to like manually go from the top every time?
I will say, you know, as you're searching, some of the things that stood out to me that I thought were interesting is like they keep referring to the Mother or the ALLMOTHER, and I think it's reasonable even at this early stage to infer that maybe this is the woman in black from the opening of the game. So I have lots of questions about who this Mother character is and why they would refer to her that way if it is her. The other thing that I was immediately thinking of is the TV show Doom Patrol, because there is a character called Jane on Doom Patrol that has multiple personalities. And each personality has like a different set of superpowers is kind of her thing.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
The way that it works is if you are like, when she wants to call forth a new personality, they get on a subway train and like ride that from like the subconscious to the surface. And so that's where my mind immediately went with this. Like, oh, I wonder if this is like similar to that, or this is like happening inside someone's mind, like a Inside Out situation, or like.
Yeah, honestly, part of me wondered that too. Like, there's so much technology and sort of surrealism throughout this game so far that part of me, yeah, part of me is wondering how much of this happens. And there is quite a bit where we bounce into, we'll talk later about communion, which is this simulated reality. These are simulations of memories. So we are bouncing back between what we think is reality versus what we know it isn't. And I think time also is very fluid. So I'm still not, I'm not going to get rid of the fact that this may also be another layer of simulation in some way, potentially. It's so early to be able to tell. Gosh, I'm learning right now in real time that the Steam Deck ability to scroll through screenshots is actually quite inefficient. There's a line, I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, but I'll have to get just the gist of it, where your character says like, don't you dare come back. And that for me really was striking, but it was one of those where I was like, I'm not sure why I am focusing on this line. And they talk about how everyone says, don't you dare come back when someone leaves, because this is a regular occurrence. Like, people are called to this station to be taken away to fight the occupants, to hone their focus or their purpose, their function, which their also super mechanical. Like, this idea of function means they're programmed versus like a human being like developing interests or strengths or skills. So I think the line of don't you dare come back, that for me, for whatever reason, really hit, but I'm not entirely sure why yet.
There's something to that. And like, just to fast forward for like 2 minutes and then we can come back, but like in the very beginning of the next chapter, as you're kind of in one of these kind of simulated memories, one of the first points of conversation is the topic of names, and how like, oh, in the past, people had these things called names that helped you associate like a word with someone. They were all really unique.
Right.
And your character as the watcher is like, that's really inefficient. Like, that's like, what's your function? Is like kind of the default questions. That's a really good call out.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just really interested in this conversation because Fixer and Watcher seem close, but there are elements where like Fixer didn't tell Watcher that this was her time to be called. Like, Watcher found out because the other folks told her. And I thought that was interesting because there was a moment where Watcher's like, why didn't you just tell me? Like, what's the deal with that? And Fixer kind of is just like, you found out anyways. Like, what's the big deal? Which I thought that was a little interesting of a detail because it seems so much less, like, it feels more human and more flawed than any other part of their conversation thus far. So yeah, there's just a lot, even in this short moment between two characters, to just really try to figure out and unpiece.
I think there's also some like potentially like romantic tension between them, which I thought was interesting. And, you know, again, these characters look similar enough. You're like, is there like what's going on here? Like, these characters look very similar. So it's like, what's going on here? What does this mean? But they have a history, right? Like, this is not just like an acquaintance or someone that like you know of. Like, this is someone there's like a deep connection to.
Yeah, which I think there's like an announcement where they say train departing sisters. So like, you know that at least in title they're sisters.
Right.
What that truly means, we don't exactly know. But like, that's when we start to say, okay, we're going to call the folks who also live in this sort of complex or this area sisters. But we don't know what that means exactly.
Yep.
Anything else you wanted to pull out from like this train station moment? Because I think that was, I think that's the prologue.
That's the prologue. Yeah, kind of getting through all of that. And, you know, the thing that I kept noticing was like, the mouths don't move. And I was like, is there like some sort of telekinetic thing happening here? Eventually there's kind of this little floating device that's around you that's like your secretary or something like that. And it's like, how are we actually communicating right now? Like, is it actually like a verbal component, or is there something else happening? And that's just something I'm still very curious about from that opening scene.
I also wasn't entirely sure because it was like, if we're in a digital space, is it because we don't have to open our mouths because we're like, that's not necessary? Is this a limit? Is this just one of those things where it's like, in development, they said, hey, it'd be easier and just more clean if we just did not animate the mouths.
Sure,
So
totally.
it's one of those things that I also pinned for future, like, let's keep an eye on this to see if there is more detail or movement in the future. And if so, then maybe that does mean something really significant.
Yes. And we do move from here into your first communion, which, you know, we love to bring the religious analysis into these conversations. Immediately,
this game is rife with religious symbolism.
My goodness. You know, for those of you that are not steeped in like Christian culture, you're super lucky. But in any case, the idea of communion, that like you are literally consuming, or like metaphorically in some churches, the body of Christ and the blood of Christ. That this is a long held like sacred tradition, a sacrament, and it's supposed to be like the way that you demonstrate that you're coming into like a deeper connection or relationship with, in Christianity, with Jesus. So the idea that you are going to go into this communion, and what that actually means, is something that, like, now after 2 chapters, I still am not quite sure, because it really kind of took me in a different direction than I was expecting in chapter 2.
So what's, from my knowledge of, because I like went to church as a young child, so my religious education ended at like elementary school, but, or my direct experience, I guess. But yeah, I think this idea of communion and how that was related directly to the event of Christ dying for your sins was like something that was really embedded to me as a kid. And so immediately, if we're taking this communion for this ALLMOTHER, I'm instantly like, okay, there's some element of like sin that we're going to be grappling with here, that I think is going to be really important. Do I know what it is? Not currently. I also just went and looked up the definition because I was like, I don't know what communion means technically, so let me look it up because I don't know. And according to Oxford Languages Dictionary, the first definition of communion is the sharing or exchanging of intimate thoughts and feelings, especially when the exchange is on a mental or spiritual level. So even separating it from this idea of like the Christian ritual of communion, I think there's still this level that we can still bring in and understand of like ideas and sort of this vulnerability of sharing intimate thoughts and feelings. I do think, though, that this is directly tying into a more religious aspect, but I wanted to bring that definition in just to expand
communing communing does not belong to Christianity, and we're going to liberate the word.
But I do think this does have, again, where we have this ALLMOTHER who seems to be a very we don't know if it's more like Christ-like or God-like figure, but definitely a figure of significance to these sisters. I mean, if we're taking communion for the ALLMOTHER, that must mean something really important. And I think it's the principal who is telling us to do this at this point.
Yeah. So you open into chapter 1 and the world is red and it is spooky AF, and you get kind of this like fuzzy, crackly sound of the principal that's trying to talk to you. That was a really interesting component to me. Just the idea that there is a principal. What does that mean?
Right. Well, and it's weird because like we start with like the singular tree, which I thought was also super. Did you remember the scene right beforehand?
Right.
And I think that's also really interesting because like, again, we're in this super technological place, but why are we, like, the place in which we're taking communion is at this sort of very natural source. Don't know what that means, but I thought that felt very striking because everything else has been so not natural.
You have struck a chord with me. So what is fascinating as you are the watcher going through this memory is that, like, you know nothing. Like, you're literally like watching. What you learn is like the mother, you're watching her memories and participating in them as though you were her. And what is constantly happening is your little is it called the secretary that's hanging out with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, secretary.
Secretary that's hanging out with you has to explain everything that you're seeing as though you've never seen it before. You're very much like an innocent baby who's been thrown into this. So like, what is a name? Oh, I don't know. What is a book? I don't know. Like, I think they knew what books were, but like, there's like
the phone, like a cell phone. Yeah.
The bathroom, like tampons, like it was just like, this person knows nothing. And so now that you've said that, I'm thinking very much like knowledge, like the tree of knowledge, like from, again, perhaps another biblical allusion there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and we're in this super red, like everything is red, saturated and tinted red, and it's a high school. So like you said, we're going into Iris's memories, and everyone in this memory sees Watcher as Iris. So as Watcher's going through talking with the different folks, they refer to her as Iris. And this is post-occupant like invasion. The other characters you're seeing initially seem to be military, like soldiers of some kind, guards of some kind. They seem in varying degrees a little bit resentful, judgmental towards Iris, impatient, resigned to the fact that somehow she is surviving, we learn, and has not caught this illness that caused most of the population to perish. But they have to sort of take care of her because she decided to come back to this high school.
Yes, and they're upset by that. And am I correct that they were also kind of alluding to the fact that, like, at least some of them also were in this high school with her? What is happening with that?
Right. So not only has she survived, but she doesn't seem to have aged. Like, she has stayed a generally high school aged person this whole time. And later we learn it's like the year 2047, I think.
Oh, I missed that.
Is about maybe not this red area, but it's like definitely in like our world almost, maybe 50-ish, 50 some odd years into the future, maybe 50 plus. So yeah, it becomes even more interesting because it grounds everything. For me, at least, it became more interesting because it grounded everything in a reality that felt very of this time.
I agree. And honestly, critically important for me. Like the sci-fi elements, the in media res murder at the beginning, it's like, this is cool. But when a story is completely set in a sci-fi time, it can be hard for me to keep my focus there. But once we started bopping back to a more like modern day setting, and you're like working through like what has happened to the world, I was like, okay, I'm sold. Like, I'm totally into this.
Yeah. And so what's fascinating is you're walking through this high school, everything is red, very heavy, very ominous, and you're trying to get up to the roof. And I forget exactly what happens, but basically you cannot, or you get up to the roof and you're supposed to find, I think explicitly they tell you to find the principal or to go to the gym, and it's not possible. So the first bit of like, ooh, this is gonna get real weird,
like the memory's not available of the gym.
Yes. You realize because Iris did not encounter the gym at that point in time, you have to go back in time to when Iris had encountered the gym, which is, I think that's when it's maybe 2047.
Yeah,
so I
misquoted.
Yeah. And so you get this power to essentially use the bumpers to pop yourself back in time to 2047, when this high school and this world was not all red and ominous, but they're actually getting ready for a graduation dance, which seems nice.
Yes. And you're also, I think you bounce between a few different times, like kind of the day or within a few days after the dance, and then the day before the dance. And so it's all happening like really quickly. I gotta say, the motion of moving between times is smooth. Like once I figured out like, oh, here's how you're like using your bumpers to like jump between timelines, to like you're solving puzzles, you're moving out of the way of debris or kids that won't move or whatever. Like, I just thought that it was such a smooth mechanical experience. Did you find
Mhm.
yourself like enjoying that aspect at all?
Yeah, and I loved it. I thought it was really like you could be running, and as you're running, go back and forth between time, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought felt super good.
Yes.
It made everything feel natural. It made it feel even more like, oh, we are actually Watcher in this simulation, able to control it sort of at a drop of a thought, you know?
Mm.
Like, um,
Yeah.
I think what was really cool too is at the bottom, what is it, left hand corner, they have the number. And so like when you're in sort of the quote memory time before everything really goes down, it's like a -2 or a -1, and they're indicating it like to the dance, I believe, like the day of the dance, sort
Oh,
of
I bet
this.
you're right.
So when
Oh.
you're in walking around the high school, and I'm looking at the screenshots right now, it is mostly -2. So this is like -2 is the day of the dance. So that's 2 days from, we don't know what zero necessarily indicates anymore, but it's probably, I ended up hypothesizing, and I think it's confirmed later on in the chapter, but day zero is this day of like everyone falling ill.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
so too.
this day of the dance is -2, so you get this kind of like little timeline hint,
Hmm.
which is important to kind of keep an eye on, because especially in chapter 2, which we'll talk about today as well, um, you are hopping back and forth between like -3, you know, -11, +14. You know, it's just like all over the place.
So we are going to meet in this moment, like on the rooftop, to solve this gym puzzle. Kind of this
Hmm.
essential character that this story is orbiting around. But I am just kind
Yes.
of curious if there were any Easter eggs or clues that you found as you were exploring that you found particularly interesting.
Um, Golly, again, I will upload my screenshots next time so that they're a little bit easier to go through. There was so much that I screenshot. I think before we meet sort of this main character that we have not talked about yet, um, I screenshot a few things, but it was mostly sort of like at that time, just me being interested in what Watcher didn't know
Mm, yeah.
versus what Watcher knew, which is a little bit goes a little bit further. So I think meeting this next character, I have a lot more
Big
to say.
change. Yeah. I think the two things that stood out to me, like one is that the character that you whose memories you are in, mother's memories, right? Her name is Iris. I think it's interesting.
Hmm.
Iris Watcher, like, okay,
Yep.
cool. And
Hmm.
then the I think you found like a textbook or some notes that break down the components of genes, like the
Yes.
GATC kind of thing,
Guanine. Yeah.
adenine,
Adenine.
yeah,
Yeah.
etc. And I was like, oh, we got ourselves some clones, baby. That was for me like the
Yes.
moment where I was like, we got clones. We're clone confirmed, and I felt very good about that.
Yes. Well, and I think also, yeah, I remember seeing that and being like, okay, clones. And it's even further reinforced once you get to the sort of quote, I say present day because it's like closer to our present day, but the day of the dance,
Hmm.
there's actually a girl in the library who even talks about like cloning,
Yes,
and about how she'd clone her cats and everything. So they're
totally.
they're definitely like not subtle about the fact that, okay, cloning is going to be a major component of the story, and it's something we should think about, pay attention to.
And I do think it helps give you that, like, oh, maybe this is why some basic parts, even of human anatomy, are a complete mystery to our main character, the Watchers. Because it's like, oh, if I'm a clone,
Hmm.
maybe I don't have some of these normal bodily functions that
Yeah,
a non clone would have.
right. Um, I think also there are a couple of surreal things that just like brought me a little bit of joy. And once you are able to flash forward and back in time, you can kind of see the context of them. There's like a pigeon, giant pigeon that you can talk to. Did you find that one?
Yes, that dude is
Yeah.
freaky.
It was so weird.
Pigeon
And it
Prime.
just, yeah, Pigeon Prime. I thought that was a really fun detail. And I did find one screenshot where, again, it's this person who, in the sort of red high school time, talks about how the iris's condition seems more and more like a curse each day. So it's this idea of being essentially the last human potentially who's surviving all of this. Um, So yeah, really, really heavy stuff happening.
So we make our way to the roof,
Yep.
and what you see is a series of candles. And there's like, you get the name of one guard, which is, I think, Johnson 50 or something like that. And you
Yes.
kind of see him throughout. So I guess maybe worth mentioning, because I don't know what his role is going to be, but he's giving you a hard time. He's like, oh, you got out. This is the last time we're going to let you out. And just so that you can light some candles. So you go to the
Yeah.
roof. There are all these candles lit. And you see a picture of a young girl or young woman, perhaps, Zhao. And the picture starts talking to you, and it becomes like the keystone, or talking to her becomes kind of the keystone that lets you kind of hop back and forth through time. And you get the sense that you have a close, somehow intimate relationship with this character.
Yes. And you have to find Zhao in 3 different places, and they illustrate the places. And so this is the first more like video gamey section, in the sense that you have to use the red time to be able to get into these rooms, because they're blocked by students. Switch back to, quote, 2047. I guess I'll actually just use the year, and talk to Zhao. And golly, there's some really interesting conversations that come through these 3 areas. The first one I did was the lavender one. I don't know if you paid attention to the titles. There was
No,
one
I
that was like a
didn't.
lavender scent, I think was the title. Um, I think it was the one in the music room.
Okay, music room.
I think. And basically, when you talk to Zhao, she mentions how like, oh, there's this boy, you must be so into him. And Iris is like, no, no, not even. He wouldn't even be interested in me. And says, and I screenshot this and I actually was able to find it. Zhao says, but you always smell like lavender and strawberry pocky. And Zhao says a lot of other details that gives you the feeling that Zhao is interested in Iris as more than a friend. Yeah. She's paying attention to Iris, and generally, if you pay attention to details like that, you have perhaps a crush, which makes some of their other interactions in the other rooms a little bit heartbreaking on many levels, I think. So did you want to detail maybe one of the other rooms?
So I actually did not write down the specifics of them, so I can't. But I can say that, like, the unrequited love of this is just a really fascinating part of the story. And so as you like, when you find her in each of these rooms, the thing that I found really confusing, and I'm wondering if I like sped through a line of dialogue, so I wanted to ask you about this. So when you find her in one of these 3 locations, you have like a brief conversation, you hear something pretty heartbreaking, because it sounds like Iris did something pretty mean at this dance. You don't really know what has happened. And then you kind of end up in this liminal space where there's like, you're in this kind of open white void, and then there are like surreal representations of like a piano that's been broken apart, and you almost like zip line between these little orange symbols to make your way to Zhao within this liminal space. And I was wondering, like, have they explained like what's happening in world there at all? And maybe I just missed it.
Like what's happening in the moment of that conversation?
In the moment of like you just being in this weird space all of a sudden. Like,
I think that's maybe, I took it as a representation of you just digging further into that memory, like just like literally, or moving your body through sort of the rest of this memory to like focus on this conversation.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it may be more complex than that, but I kept it simple.
No, very, very cool. And so, like, some of the things I don't want to shortchange these conversations with Zhao, so I'll throw in like one other quick thing, which is, as you're exploring around, you meet like a boy who found this alien in the mountains and took a YouTube video of it, and now people are like following him around and like seemingly like almost worshiping him. It is, and so you also find like clues that like the infection spreads maybe through like your like the water in your body, like things about like you're crying are you actually sad or are you sick? And
yeah.
so that's all kind of the backdrop. But what other things about Zhao and those conversations that like really stood out to you? I have a few like big beat moments that stood out to me.
Yeah, one of the other moments that really stood out to me, in addition to sort of the profession of like unrequited love, this basically conversation that Zhao and Iris had about how, Zhao said, "Oh, I'm always going to be an FOB." So that's fresh off the boat for folks who don't know. That's usually a negative phrase given or said towards any person from Asia or of Asian descent who just seems like they just came off the boat, to whatever country they are trying to acclimatize to. And so this tension between the two of them, because for Iris, Zhao represents this closeness to like Hong Kong that I think she does not have. And Zhao trying to be friends, but also like increasingly feeling homesick and unwelcome in Canada. We learned that this is based in
Oh, did we
Canada.
learn that? I was wondering if they
Yes.
said it and I just missed it. Okay.
Yeah, I think they say it technically in chapter 2, but I realized it in chapter 2. I don't know if it happens in chapter 1, but yeah, you see Zhao trying to like become just like one of the kids, one of the other students, and is just not successful during this conversation also. So there's like that layer of tension between them. They also have a line about how this disease, like, it doesn't come from us, and so that also really hit home in terms of this idea of a disease coming from a specific people, specifically at the early times of COVID, when people like basically said, oh, this is, a racial thing. People from China, people from Asia are bringing COVID over, which is absolutely like, that is not how the disease works. That's not it. And so seeing that conversation, as well as the layer of her trying to like not be, an FOB.
Yeah.
That was just heartbreaking for me. Like I also started getting choked up super early in this game, and I'm just like, I don't think I'll be able to handle the ending.
For me, it was like, it was subtle at first. Like there were comments like, there was a moment where they were having a conversation and Zhao was using words. I can't remember if they were Mandarin or like some like specific dialect of Chinese. And Iris it seems like pretending not to understand. And it's like, that was the thing that drew my attention to like, oh, I need to be very focused on this element of the story. And I think you so perfectly captured it. And it was one of the things where it's like, once I heard that, when you hear the kids saying, oh, he found an alien in the mountains, I was like, oh, there's some shit happening here with this story. This story has a story,
Yeah.
And I guess the other piece of that was like, I think she makes a comment like, they don't think that about me because I was born here or something like that. That Iris is essentially like trying to further distance herself from Zhao. She doesn't want to get swept up in this kind of like anti-immigrant hatred that is obviously like burgeoning at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and you have kids, like, I think it was in the same cafeteria, because that was where the language discussion happened. There's a kid who even says something like, aren't you Asians supposed to be all about grades or something? Like there are comments like that from some of the other students. So you definitely feel this, like, not like open hatred necessarily, at least from some of the students, but there's definitely like racially charged comments and like that sort of if not definite aggressions, like microaggressions towards specifically these two girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as you were kind of going through here, because we're kind of nearing the end, kind of the big moment where you eventually do make it to the gym because you've solved enough of the puzzles. Were there any like final like high school call outs before we talk about the gym experience?
Yeah. So one thing I did want to call out is when you first encounter Zhao, before you start exploring the school, you see her portrait surrounded by candles with like a bowl of oranges and like I believe some incense, and that is specifically like I don't know exactly about Chinese tradition completely, but I do know that that is usually seen for someone who is deceased.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have like I know in Korea you have like food offerings that you put in front of the portrait to just essentially give them the best opportunities in the afterlife, and I imagine it's something similar. And so when we're seeing Zhao's portrait, like that is this, she is dead and gone, but the significance of it is huge. And so I just wanted to highlight that as a cultural nod, I guess, for folks who may not realize like the actual sort of symbolism of this arrangement.
There's a quote that I thought maybe was connected to that, where I think it's Zhao who says, "I can't be a picture." And I was wondering if that was her foreshadowing her own death. And it was right around that same time that Secretary, who as far as we know is just like a robot floating device, says, "I want to live," which raises further questions to me about like kind of sentience and like programming. And so, yeah, I think you've hit on something like that I think is really core here, and I'm super interested to unravel this.
Same. And the reason why Secretary is saying this is because as they're exploring the simulation, you are delving into Iris's memories, specifically of Zhao and this like complex relationship they have. As an aside, I also get the feeling here that because like Zhao talks about how nice Iris's mom is and how like, oh, your mom lent me all these clothes so I could fit in and all this stuff. And Iris is like, my mom's not that nice. What are you talking about? So there's also this extra layer, I think, of tension because Iris feels like Zhao is getting along with her mom better than she gets along with her mom. And that just probably doesn't sit very well. Again, especially considering her complex feelings of identity being a Canadian Chinese person, Chinese Canadian. But the reason why Secretary says I want to live is because there's some sort of infiltrator that has come into communion, has come into the memory that isn't supposed to be there. And this honestly sent chills up my spine because I was like, I'm already feeling a little bit uneasy. And this layer of like something is wrong. And you get the voice over the intercom of like, not safe, get out. You know, it's like, oh God, okay, what? And you learn that the infiltrator is actually Fixer, which is wild.
Fixer has come, much as the snake into the garden, bearing some knowledge about what is going on a deeper level and placing some seeds of doubt into our character's mind.
Yes. Which some of which we kind of got the feeling as we were exploring the memories. One of the things that Fixer brings up is the fact that Iris, ALLMOTHER, portrays herself as this compassionate, good, kind, benevolent leader to all, but as a high schooler and through her memories, wasn't the nicest person. In fact, was, I think, intentionally cruel, especially to Zhao. There's even a mention of Zhao being like, I did what you dared me to do and like fixed the votes for the competition so you would win the scholarship. That's huge. Like, what? So we learned that about Iris, and we also learn one huge piece of information.
Which one do you got? I've got a few. So what are you thinking about?
Yeah, well, the biggest one that really caught my eye was that Fixer says she denies us immunity.
And she hits us and she denies us immunity. That was a huge one for sure.
Because the fact is, we know that they live in a world where they have to wear masks all of the time. They don't go above into the surface because of this occupation. And if ALLMOTHER has immunity and she is willingly keeping it away from the sisters, why?
What's going on there?
And she also says, and pardon the F-bomb, but she's like, you also shouldn't like fuck the occupier.
Yeah, that she's like secretly talking with someone, maybe an occupant. Yeah, you're supposed to end the occupants, not fuck them. I thought that was a great line.
Yeah. I laughed because I was like, man, Fixer is awesome.
And I think you get a line from Fixer And it might not have been Fixer. It might be like right after this, but someone says,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be so close. Oh, no, it is right after. So you're talking to the principal right after, and she's like, you're the
Yes.
Watcher. And like, basically, you're wondering as Watcher, are you going to sell out Fixer or not? Are you going to rat on her for
Yeah.
being the like infiltrator into this dream? And
Right.
you do sell her out when you talk to the principal, which is another function of yourself.
Yep.
And as the principal is complimenting you, she says, you will be so close to the mother that you could draw blood. And I was like, man, that is some
What?
killer foreshadowing considering the opening of the game.
Yes. Yeah. And I will say the scene where, you're ending your communion, you're walking through the gym. Mm-hmm. And you see the bodies of these students, and we didn't really go into detail of this, but basically this inciting event, that 0 day, is the basically everyone in Iris's high school catching this mysterious illness, and basically all of the kids dying. Mm-hmm. Like, this is nearly all of them dying, and so immediately. And you see their bodies like floating in this gym with this really creepy orange light. It was chilling, but really, really beautifully done. Yeah. But it's interesting because, again, we have these, like, we have Watcher, Healer, Fixer, and Principal is such an oddball to me.
Very different. I can't help but wonder if Principal's facilitating a lot of this in the background.
Yeah. And Principals, to me, which I know is not true because there are great principals out there, but it's a very punitive feeling, very administrative and disconnected feeling, like stereotypically feeling position.
Yeah.
Because you're, this idea of you're not in the trenches, in with the students. And so I think this idea of a principal being the one who's administering these communions, giving these rules out to the sisters, is a really interesting one. Like, why not any other title?
And really. Yes, exactly. And it's like, once you're back in kind of like the present day, you you see the principal who's like, well, I'm going to make an announcement to everyone. And this is where you learn, like, oh, like, there's not just like the few clones with the roles. You have younger versions of the clones just waiting to like take their role, essentially.
Right.
So Fixer's leaving. Like, there's another younger Fixer coming.
Yeah, which is really wild. But again, going with the sort of allegorical everything, this feels very like Garden of Eden-y. It's called the orchard. So this idea, this symbolism of like the tree, perhaps like they don't eat. We learned that these clones don't eat, but this idea of like the fruit, the apple and the fruit, like I feel like we're going to see some of that come through in some other form. As a side note, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm curious, did you see the gravestones in the high school?
Yes.
When you're in like the red scene?
Yes.
Did you find the gravestones in the orchard?
No, I didn't explore the orchard very much. So
if you explore the orchard, there is a statue that is of the six, I guess, because they're all eventually going to be the six in some way. If you go through their legs, there's a door, or like an opening, I guess. It's not even a door because you can't open it, but you go through the legs of the statues and you see this dirt mound with what I believe were the headstones, or sort of the head planks of the students. So I think that the orchard is actually built on the school, which, if you think about it, then the role of principal, like this, Iris hasn't left high school, like literally. So.
And there's this whole thing about her being like frozen in time. That's so cool. And like the high school shape in like the past is like open courtyard, but it's a square in the middle. And the orchard is kind of like artificial light, but like it's a circle that's like at the top that looks like you can see like a fake blue sky above you. So like, wow, I'm so glad you caught that. I totally missed that.
Okay. And you also just said something where it's, because they say, what is it, circle to square? And the shape of the buildings being
circle
square.
To square.
I feel like there is not, I don't feel like that's a coincidence. So yeah, just things to point out, just to put in with this episode. I feel like we're just absorbing and just noting as much as we can to make sure we keep in mind as we move forward in the story. But yes, you go to the principal's office as you leave communion. You get praised for, you know, keeping a vigilant watch and honoring the Allmother and like making sure everyone stayed safe from Fixer. Oh my gosh. And then honestly, this made me laugh a little bit, and it was also slightly unnerving, but the funniest slideshow happens up in the blue circle sky.
The like nursery rhyme-esque, like
high school anime drawing slideshow.
It's even like, I would say middle school. Like, it is very bad children drawings. It's like, because we want to root out this evil of the Fixer, we're going to show you what Mother did to the Fixer. And instead of like showing video clips or whatever, you see like middle school level quality drawings of like, here's the Mother meeting Fixer. And here's a new page of the Mother lighting Fixer on fire. And like, then you get these like very detailed, very grown up versions of like a skull and a body, horrifying, being lit on fire. And that was like, oh, tone shift, big time.
Yeah, it was wild. Yeah, I'm looking at the screenshots of it now. It's terrifying. And we see these, like more middle schooly like level. I don't know. I would draw at this level, to be very honest, but like these like really childish drawings. We saw those earlier as well at the end of communion, which I thought was interesting. So this is also another visual medium and sort of thematic sort of storytelling method that we're going to probably see come back a couple of times, I would guess.
You do learn in one of these phrases, either it's the end of the communion or it's during this one, that like you get a little slice of history that the Mother has promised a cure, but one of the clones early on rebelled, and maybe that is why the cure is now being withheld. So you get a little glimpse into what has been happening in the past here,
right? Which and correct me if I'm wrong, but my brain instantly went to like original sin of like Adam and Eve in the garden. I don't know if you can add more context to that.
You are being punished for the sins of your fathers, or in this case, like your sister mothers. Like, there's definitely something to this. And like, I can't help but wonder, this is why the principal thing feels so sus to me. If like they intentionally have someone kind of fall from grace, if you will, with each one of these batches as a way to reinstate the fear, keep it so that mom has a reason to not give the cure out. Like, oh, she has a good reason. Don't you know? Like, someone rebelled once. Like, I just can't help but wonder if like all of that is like being set up, like someone intentionally placed these thoughts into Fixer's head.
Right. So the principal tasks you with going to BB or to everyone essentially, but first to BB to start just doing communion with each of the sisters, each of sort of the main sisters, to just make sure everything is good, make sure everyone's okay, which makes me feel like it's not really okay. And you have the option also to talk to a bunch of the other sisters and learn more about this world.
I did not take advantage of that, just to be honest. I went pretty much straight to BB because I was like, I gotta know what's going on here. And this is the thing that I was saying earlier, like really threw me for a loop when I thought about communion, because you learn that as watcher over time, you're going to be experiencing all of Mother's memories. Like, that is your function. But it was odd to me that when you go to BB and you have communion, you start reliving Mother's memories, like a new set of memories from the Mother that BB has, but you don't. And I mean, it could just be like, maybe eventually you would get this anyway, but it felt very odd to me that like different roles are getting different memories to connect with Mother over. I thought that was like I don't know, just to me seems like suspicious. Something's going on there.
Yeah. And I also felt like that was an interesting point that each of them would have different memories to offer Watcher. And I attributed that to, okay, you have very specific functions and they have these phrases. I think you learn a lot of really interesting bits about life in the orchard as you explore. I think the most fascinating elements to me, one was in the healers section. You actually can see some of that cloning process happen, and how the healers actually take, DNA and a strand of hair and all of these chemicals and things and look at the color of what happens, and that's how you get assigned your color and your function. I thought that was fascinating.
That is interesting.
You see a sort of a more silly, whimsical moment of some of the sisters, the younger sisters, creating their own, they called it like a guerrilla play of what happened, the great unfixing or whatever they called it. And it's a dramatic reenactment of what happened between you and Fixer. And so you see that. So you see this element of playfulness with the sisters.
Yeah.
And then when you go into what essentially is the library, and you talk to Knower, one of Knower's, I guess, like acolyte sisters allows you to ask and learn a little bit more about some of the phrases that you will constantly hear as you walk around in the game.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
So some of it I kind of had surmised based on just the context clues, like hair to hair. Constantly the option of meticulous came up whenever, and so it's more about like making sure you pay attention to the details. It's also like sort of the signifying of like your hair, like literally is these strands of DNA that are exact to one another. One of the other phrases, I think it's what's it called? The sphere to square is sharpening yourself, honing your functions. So it's like an edge. The acolyte also mentions that it's quite interesting that spheres are 3D and squares are 2D. And so this idea of flattening yourself to be able to become perfect towards your one goal and function for the ALLMOTHER, very fascinating that's a virtue. One of the other details that I particularly liked was the red to blue.
Yeah. Say more about that.
Yes. So we see the color red and the color blue quite frequently, especially in the communion. We start, everything is red. This signifies the what is it? The occupiers? I forget.
Occupants.
Is that what they're? Occupants, yep. This signifies the occupants because they have turned the world above into this red world now. And blue signifies not only this idea of the blue sky, so this idea of red to blue means we are going to work to change the world to be the clear blue sky again. We're going to save the world. But I think this idea of Watcher being blue is also quite significant. I think this movement towards knowing is this red to blue. So I think when you look at this color palette and when you hear folks say red to blue, that is, we'll dig into it more, but that's sort of a surface level, I think, or initial description of it. I think one of the others was it 6-1 or 6 of 1? I'm trying to, again, Steam is really wrecking me here with the screenshots. But there's one where essentially it's like we are 6, but we are of 1. So we are all of the ALLMOTHER. So these sayings have really specific contexts that they are said within. And they are also repeated quite a bit as these religious reinforcements. I think the other one was, it's like Heka.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you hit this one. I don't remember what the word is, like Heka or Hell or something like that. It's like...
Yeah. I'm trying to find it in my screenshots because I know I took it quite often. And I am not, again... The
Steam Deck's ability to scroll through images is terrible. That's why I stopped doing it.
This was my first time because I was like getting hand cramps from writing, but I might just go back to writing. But yeah, this like, there are lots of sayings is what we're going to really just get at and these sayings are very specific to the context. Like once you start understanding what they mean, when they are said is very significant. Like they're referring to specific ideologies. And honestly, I'm probably going to just start saying hair to hair at this point.
Hair to hair, like, baby.
Yeah. It's just, it's so good. So yeah, those were some of the things that I discovered as I was exploring. But when you talk to BB, that's like the main part of chapter
Yeah, the
2.
thrust of
So
it.
what happens when you talk to BB Fire?
Yeah, so you do you jump into having communion and partaking in the memories that BB gets to have, and BB is kind of strangely quiet whenever you encounter her because it's unlike last time you're not alone. So like you're going to relive memories, but BB is usually there somewhere, usually silent, usually not looking at the scene, usually kind of like looking out a window or like trying hard not to see what's happening here. And essentially, what is happening is you are going to experience Iris's home life. So you're going to jump through, I think you have like 9 different time periods that you jump between in this one. Everything from you getting like very small moments with your dad, getting kind of obnoxious arguments with your mom, all like all the way from like you're a little kid and you're about to move maybe from Hong Kong to Canada. So you're seeing like the argument with the grandparents. So everything from like as far back as that all the way up into like you are an adult in Canada. So I'm assuming you're 18 and the military or people in military outfits are in your home saying, you have the cure. You should come with us, and your mom and dad trying like begging you not to, and you are saying like, well, yeah, I'm gonna go. So you span memories from all of those times, and it was such a rich chapter in terms of like what you learn about yourself and about the world and your family. You learn that like your mother maybe has some sort of like mental disassociation happening, but she seems to be she has like the sleepwalking thing where the dad has to kind of stay up late to make sure she doesn't hurt herself. Like she talks to people that aren't there. So you're seeing that like maybe the mom is also somehow connected to this larger mystery of the world. Your dad is constantly hinting at the challenges of the time that are maybe not connected to this kind of alien presence, but like he's referencing like some sort of like maybe police force that is being abusive, that like people are disappearing. The way the mom and dad meet, which I thought was kind of cute, is like the dad maybe got beat up by someone and then is like, can I have your number, to the mom, like who will eventually become the mom. So like there's some very cute interactions, and one really fucked up interaction that I'll just kind of say now, and then we can go anywhere you want within this chapter, which is you learn that one, like the mom and daughter, like they very much do not get along. Like there's a lot of conflict. Maybe that's a strong way to say it, but like there's a lot of conflict in their relationship.
Right.
And kind of calling her lazy, things like that. And then near the end, you learn that like Iris has quote anger issues, and the way they describe that is that it sounds like Iris microwaved her hamster and it died and exploded. So to me, like this screams like we've been hinting at this, that like the mother has like some serious issues. Like this is screaming like sociopathic behavior to me. But yeah, so kind of broadly speaking, that's kind of the broad brushstrokes of like all of chapter 2. But like, what were some of like the big beats that like really stood out to you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think the mother's story, the mother and father's story are really interesting because when we first meet them, we're like, oh, it's an immigrant family in Canada. You know, this is a story we're familiar with. We've played games like Venba. And so I think as players, maybe who've encountered other similar stories, we may on the surface be like, oh, this is great. We understand exactly what's going on here. There's tensions of trying to fit in. I think what's most interesting, and again, a testament to how this game grounds itself in reality, is when you go back in time and you see some of these past memories that focus on the parents. These are like 2020, 2021. This is during, I think there was maybe one in 2019. Hong Kong had protests during that time. Basically, Hong Kong had many months of pro-democracy protests. China did not react positively to that. So there was a lot of police and governmental brutality that resulted from that. And so when I saw especially the mother and what seemed like to me was perhaps there was some other mental illness that she was struggling with there, but a lot of it seemed to be like post-traumatic stress from these events.
Yeah.
And the dad even alluded to the fact that it kind of happens perhaps throughout the year, but specifically like every year there's a time period where the mom really has trouble at night, going out to the balcony, talking in her sleep. And it's this result of remembering what happened. And there's an argument, you know, that the mom and dad have even behind the doors where it's like, you know, Iris is lazy, she's not doing anything. And the dad's like, remember when we were her age? We were fighting, like, we were fighting the government. We were not able to be kids. Let's let Iris be kids. And so I thought this additional layer of essentially kind of these traumas that this family has been through, that Iris has also witnessed, and is carrying with her through essentially what seems to be now an immortal life of some sort. I thought that was really powerful and heartbreaking. And I was shocked. I was really shocked at the hamster story that we got. Because when we learned about Iris not being very kind, this was like, oh, maybe she's just going through a rough time in high school.
Right.
You know, we all have said horrible things. We have all been mean to other kids. You know, when you're a kid, you're learning, you're growing, you're becoming hopefully what will be a better version of yourself through those experiences. Microwaving an animal is not something that's normal.
We've broken the mold here. This is no longer
this is out of the ordinary. So that just added also another layer of what is going on with Iris here that we don't know, and how is this going to impact maybe how we see these sisters interact, because we know that they're clones. But just to be clear, this is reinforced with the high schoolers conversation. Just because someone is a clone does not mean they are going to have the exact same personality. They will react in the same ways.
I think they say something a line that's something like, no two hairs are the same, which is a really funny counterpoint to the hair to hair.
Hair to hair.
So yeah, I thought that was really fascinating. And, you know, I gotta say, the moments of the scene were emotionally kind of tough. Like you're watching, like, yeah, and to your point with like the Venba story, like some of these are like things that we've seen before, but as you're digging more into the, like, you're in your room packing your things to go, your mom is banging on the door, and you're deciding like what comes with you. You're watching and you're overhearing your mom and dad talking about you through a closed door. You're seeing your mom like very much like lifting up Zhao, and like as like Zhao is like someone that the mom's like connects with a lot more easily, and it's like, you can have Iris's winter clothes. It's just like, oof, like you see a lot of the things that like inform the experiences that we saw in the high school.
What was really heartbreaking to me also, you get these moments that are a bit more mundane also, but still, again, heartbreaking. You see Iris's birthday. I don't remember what birthday it is, but you see family has decked out. You've got your red envelopes, which is money given to you for your birthday. Iris sort of makes a snide comment about how that's all her mom knows how to give. You have this cake, you have pizza. Dad comes in and is like, let me make you, noodles because we want to like celebrate a long life. And Iris is like, no, Dad, we're not going to do noodles. Like, my friends aren't going to want to eat noodles. They want pizza. I want pizza. You don't know me. It's like, it's such a, like, growing up, like, I remember having similar conversations. It's conversations we've encountered in games like Venba. It is it feels like it's stereotypical, but at the same time, it is such a major part of like
cultural
first generation experiences, especially at that time.
Totally.
And what even adds a layer of extra sadness to it is you see Iris creating this disconnect between her family and with herself and her parents. And you turn to Zhao, and Zhao's like, well, maybe all your friends are going to be coming soon. and they'll all shout surprise, and it's like maybe they'll all be surprising you. I got the impression that nobody probably came to that birthday party. And so it's this heartbreak of someone who is trying to distance herself to fit in, but it's clearly not working. And so she's just in this sort of isolated bubble on her own. Yeah, God, it's just so powerful and so sad.
You do at the kind of the end of these memories come back and you find your mom like staring out the window. You can see the shape of the like giant red like alien creature in the distance, and you learn that like your dad is not there anymore, and it's just like it's one of those moments where like it must have happened because it's like a memory, right? But like it is such a sad moment that it's like it feels surreal, like beyond like the reality of it. It feels more like something that she would have maybe invented for herself as a way to like imagine what happened.
Yeah. Well, and you see, I think one of the close to concluding scenes in this communion with BB is a shadow of the mom kind of saying at the balcony looking down. So you wonder, like, did the dad end up, after all those years of preventing her mom from jumping off the balcony, did the dad take his own life? Especially because the dad says something along the lines of, if you go, I won't be able to
he does say
go on without you. And you hear the mom saying like lazy, like you can be lazy all you want now because you're not here anymore. And I was wondering if that was meant to be for Iris or if that was meant to be for her father. And it was just super intense to play this chapter. And throughout the whole time, BB is just watching the rain and kind of commenting on sort of how, like, she's never seen rain before, how prolific it is, like that it keeps coming. And so it's just there's just so much happening in the scenes here.
I just have so many curiosities about where the story is going, about these characters. Like, the reason that you're doing this kind of memory swap with all the others is because you're trying to root out these evils. And the damage that we experienced with BB's memory just makes me wonder if we're going to be going through and seeing like all of these clones are dealing with severe trauma from having to live these experiences. Like, I don't know how you could go through any of these and not. So I'm really curious about this. And I think this game has done such a fantastic job of setting up the mystery of it all. I think the mechanics are like interesting enough to like keep you engaged without it being like you're just like hitting A over and over again. It's like, no, like there's some fun little mechanical moments to like keep you like zoned in. But I'm really digging it. I'm really digging it so far.
Yeah. And also, we haven't talked about the voice acting, but I think the voice acting is incredible. So I feel like just completely engaged. I want to hear the voice lines. I am really enjoying just the simple act of playing this game. Story, aside, is just a very, very enjoyable game to listen to.
That's so true. We haven't talked about that, but it is incredible. So great call out.
Do you have any predictions for what may happen next?
I am pretty sure that by the end of this game, Watcher is going to stab the mother. I'm feeling pretty solid about that one, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder why. What could have made
I think, there's just been a lot of
that?
clues that like only I probably have picked up on that like the average person hasn't. But
dang, you're so smart.
Your thought that like what if all of this is some sort of simulation, I think is brilliant, and I'm gonna co-sign on that one now. I really like that idea. At first I was kind of like thinking more along the lines of like you are like parts of personalities or something, but I like how you've described this a lot more. But to what end? So I don't know. I'm almost like, it's hard for me to make predictions because I'm so invested in the ride right now.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious if you think, because one of the requests, one of the hopes that Fixer had was you need to tell the other sisters. Do you think Watcher is going to willingly and actively tell the other sisters? Or do you think something else will happen that may illuminate the sisters to this? Or do you think something totally different going to happen?
I'm more concerned that all the sisters are going to get wiped out and that they might have to like start over or something like that. Like to me, like the loneliness of Watcher at the end as the mother is like reciting some sort of prayer.
Right.
I don't know. I have a, we've already seen so much death and destruction in this game. It just feels like it's only natural that this thing all goes down in flames somehow.
Yeah.
Wait a second. I just remembered. There's a line that's like, the only way you're going to get out of this is like in the flashback in the gym. The only way you're going to get out of this is if you slit your own throat or something like that.
Yeah.
So the idea that like someone said that and like it's a clone of Mother that is going to ultimately stab her is very good. This is very good writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably obvious. I don't know. It got me.
Yeah.
How about you? What are some of your thoughts, predictions, things that you're hoping might happen?
I agree with you. I think Watcher maybe is going to stab the ALLMOTHER by the end.
Yeah. All right, cool.
I think you're onto something there. My hope, because they have on a couple of occasions focused on the differences in personality between clones and the originals, sort of the N version of Iris, and I'm hoping that Watcher can be the one that maybe removes herself a little bit more from her function and maybe does try to enlist the sisters. I'm hopeful for that. I think in honor of Fixer and how much, I don't know. We don't know what their relationship was, but I feel like it was more, we didn't talk about, but Fixer left a package for Watcher.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like, I feel like in honor of the bond that everyone had with Fixer, which when you talk to the sisters, everyone is hugely impacted. And while some of the younger sisters may be like, oh, dang, yeah, that Fixer, whoa, I always knew she was no good. Some of the older sisters, the, healer, librarian, these other sisters know her, they feel like this has hit them on a level that is a bit harder. And I feel like because of that bond, perhaps they will unite to try and dig into this further. I would hope so. That's my hopefulness.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too idealistic for this game because, again, this game has gone quite dark. But yeah, we'll see.
Pretty dark, pretty quick. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm loving all the the biblical allusions are really interesting. Like, I very much resonate with like the person who has not only lost their faith, but like feels that the faith in that system is in and of itself destructive. I feel like there's a connection with the way Watcher kind of sold out Fixer, being somehow connected to Iris selling out Zhao. Like I feel like there's some cyclicalness there that I'm curious to see get explored as well.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So that's it for today. No housekeeping, I think, other than as you are playing, please jot down any questions you may have for the developers. Send them my way at jenny@geeksandgrounds.com. And yeah.
No official sign out this week, except for to say, like, if any of you figure out how to clone coffee beans, there's a great roast that I'm really into, and if you could just like send me the way to do that, that would be great.
Yeah. Red to blue, everyone.
Red to blue.
Hair to hair.
Hair to hair.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.